All right, I'm going to call this to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to our Wednesday, June 4th special board meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Vinny, here. Christy.
Here.
Bradley. Here. Stacy.
Here.
Curran.
Here.
Silva.
Here.
Linneman.
Here.
All right, we have quorum. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Superintendent Harris.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bow your heads with me, please. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day that you've provided for us. I just want to say thank you for keeping our students safe at the end of the year with the tornado and helping us able to finish that last week of school. Thank you for providing for our community. I just pray that you're with us tonight during this meeting. Help us conduct the business of the school district that would be pleasing unto you. For it's in your precious name that I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, we don't have anything under the consent agenda.
No, correct.
That's what I thought. So we'll move to the minutes, section 4, approval of the minutes of the special board meeting of the Board of Education held on May 6, 2025. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Christy.
Aye.
Bradley. Aye. Stacy.
Aye.
Curran.
Aye.
Silva.
Aye.
Linneman.
Aye.
Vinny. Aye.
All right, we'll move to section 5A, retirements and resignations.
It's recommended the following retirements and resignations listed below and on the GCSD9 website be accepted.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Bradley. Aye. Stacy.
Aye.
Curran.
Aye.
Silva.
Aye.
Linneman.
Aye.
Vinny. Aye. Christy.
Aye.
All right. Section 5B1, employment of a Prather Elementary 6th grade teacher for the 25-26 school year.
Yes, you've received detailed information about this item. The administration is prepared to make recommendations or hold for discussion in executive session. The GCSD9 Administration and Interview Committee are recommending Jessica Thompson as Prather Elementary 6th grade teacher for the 25-26 school year. Approval is recommended pending the submission of the required paperwork.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Stacy.
Aye.
Curran.
Aye.
Silva.
Aye.
Linneman.
Aye.
Vinny. Aye. Christy.
Aye.
Bradley. Aye.
Section 5B2, employment of 2 GCSD9 custodians for the 25-26 school year.
You've received detailed information about this item. The administration is prepared to make recommendations or hold for discussion in executive session. The GCSD9 Administration Interview Committee are recommending Braden Dickerson and Alex Wright as GCSD9 custodians for the 25-26 school year. Approval is recommended pending the submission of the required paperwork.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Curran.
Aye.
Silva.
Aye.
Linneman.
Aye.
Vinny. Aye. Christy.
Aye.
Bradley. Aye. Stacy.
Aye. Section 6A, request to intervene in appeal proceedings at the Property Tax Appeal Board.
The GCSD9 Administration requests that the Board of Education approve the resolution so that District Attorney Tom Schooley can intervene at the Property Tax Appeal Board with regard to the following appeal proceeding in Madison County, Illinois. Approval is recommended.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Tom, do you want to kind of just explain this real quick?
These are 5 warehouses out in the Pontoon Beach Industrial Complex. This is for tax year 2024. All 5 of these also were at PPAP for tax year 2023. This is one where the board gave authority to expend $12,500 to get appraisals. So we do have appraisals for both the 23 and the 24 tax years. This is just more of a...
And we're not the only district that kind of is in on this, right?
Pontoon Beach is in on it. We have been reimbursed for, with Edwardsville School District is in on it. They have reimbursed us for their share of the appraisals. MSD is also, Metro Sanitary District is also involved, and they also intervened.
All right. Roll call.
Silva.
Aye.
Linneman.
Aye.
Benny. Aye. Christie.
Aye.
Bradley. Aye. Stacy.
Aye.
Curran.
Aye.
All right, Section 6B, Policy and Administrative Procedures.
Yes, so what I'd like to do is just read through the administrative procedures that we're looking to have approved. Obviously, if there's some discussion, there'll probably be some discussion on it. If we need to make amendments, we can. But I'm just going to read through these so the public can hear what we're proposing. Human Resources, so these are the interview administrative procedures that we're presenting. So Human Resources will receive the current job analysis and description to ensure they accurately reflects the required knowledge, skills, abilities, and essential functions of the position. 2, Human Resources will post the position dependent on the contractual requirements, internally, externally, bid, etc. At the conclusion of the application deadline, Human Resources will conduct a paper screening of all applicants to look for minimum qualifications, spelling, grammar, and select candidates to be interviewed. If necessary, the Human Resources Department will conduct a virtual screening interview to determine qualified candidates to be scheduled for our formal interview. Bullet point, Human Resources will maintain accurate and confidential records of all interview-related documents, including applications, interview questions, evaluation forms, notes, and reference check information in accordance with district policy and legal requirements. Upon the conclusion of the application window, Human Resources will send the list of applicants to the Board of Education. 4, determine the composition of the interview committee, ensuring representation from relevant department stakeholders, example, Human Resources, hiring manager, administrators. 5, Human Resources will develop a structured set of interview questions aligned to the job requirements and the KSAs. Development consistent rating scale, an example 1 through 5, unsatisfactory to outstanding, to ensure objective and consistent assessment across all candidates. Next bullet point, create an interview evaluation form or rubric that includes the questions, evaluation criteria, and rating scales. 6, Human Resources will coordinate an interview schedule, ensuring adequate time for each interview and breaks for the interview team. Communicate interview details, date, time, location, interview team members, format, in person, virtually, clearly and promptly to candidates. Provide candidates with all necessary information or instructions prior to the interview. 7, conducting the interview. Time will be allotted 1 hour prior to the interview for the interview committee to review applicant resumes, cover letters, and interview questions. Adhere to the predetermined interview questions and ask them in the same order for all candidates. Allow candidates sufficient time to respond fully to each question. Practice active listening skills, including maintaining eye contact, nodding, and asking clarifying questions. Each member of the interview team will independently review their notes and evaluate each candidate based on the predetermined criteria and rating scale. Post-interview, the interview team will meet to discuss their individual evaluations and share their observations. Human Resources will conduct a thorough reference check for top candidates. Human Resources will conduct background checks in accordance with district policy and legal requirements. This may include criminal history checks, child abuse registry checks, and verification of credentials. Selection and offer. Based on the interview evaluations, reference checks, and background checks, Human Resources will make a final selection. If necessary, the top 3 candidates will be brought in for a second interview. Upon the final interview or consensus of the hiring committee, Human Resources will extend a formal offer of employment to the selected candidate, outlining the terms and conditions of employment pending board approval. The candidates recommended for hire will be sent to the Board of Education for approval at the next Board of Education meeting. Upon request, the Board of Education may receive the cover letters and resumes of candidates that were interviewed. Human Resources will communicate respectfully and professionally with unsuccessful candidates in a timely manner.
So we have some discussion, I'm sure. And so I'll start.
Are we being asked to make this an actionable item or not? Are we voting on this?
Yes.
Yes.
Then we need a motion.
A motion and a
before
second
we
first.
discuss, yeah.
I'd like
Okay.
it to be held for executive session.
Okay.
For what purpose, Lori? Because if you're not-
Just
You
a
can't-
little more clarification. No.
Well, it'd have to be an open session, as long as
Okay.
you're not talking about someone
Specific.
in particular.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
It has to be
Okay.
an open
I
session.
move
Alright.
to approve. Second.
All right,
Now we can talk.
discussion. So just a couple things as we go through here. For me, I see under the number 7, conducting the interview. I mean, I have concern with an hour being adequate time for people to review. If we turned 1 hour maybe into 1 day, so that, I mean, if you have 4 or 6 or what have you, an hour I don't think is enough time for people to really be able to compare and contrast and look at them. So my thought is that probably needs more time. In this,
So with that, are you meaning come down to the HR office and look at that stuff? Are
For
you
the
meaning
interview.
that stuff
I don't
sent
know how,
out?
I mean, you tell me how it's done now. So it's not sent to them?
When I first started, there were some things that I felt like were kind of leaked out, names, things that I felt like we needed to kind of rein in to make sure that we're maintaining the confidentiality of those applicants. So it can change. That's just what we've been doing thus far.
So, yeah, I mean, I think they have to have more than an hour. I don't think that's, I mean, if I was, I only look at it from my perspective. If you gave me six resumes and cover letters and everything else, taking an hour worth of time, I don't think it's fair to them, and I don't think it's fair to the candidate, right? You might be able to skim over that and be like, okay, what have you, but I think they need more time. I don't know that a day is it, but I know an hour is not it. So
I
that's
agree with
something that I think,
I think a little more time would be needed.
yeah.
So you'd like that shared with them ahead of time, just with the
Yeah.
committee?
Yes, just with the committee, in this instance, right? Another question I had was the next bullet point underneath that, the predetermined questions. Is that like required? Like you have to ask them the same questions?
Yes.
Once again, the only reason I ask that is because if I interview these 3, inevitably I'm going to have a question for one of them because of the question, right?
As someone that
follow-up
participates
question.
a lot, I mean,
Yeah,
I
that
can
I
even
might
address
not
this.
be-
As someone that participates in educational hiring
Yeah.
a lot, we are not like legally mandated, but you need to, because otherwise, if you have any irregularities or inconsistencies from one interview to the next, that can open you up to be liable for litigation, for
So-
special
but
treatment
if
of
you have-
somebody.
But like I'm saying, if you have a follow-up question.
You need to keep them pretty limited, and you need to try to ask the same questions across. It has to be very standardized, because otherwise, you're giving each person a different interview.
I can tell you one thing just recently we did, and that's why they conducted a second interview. They brought someone back in because they felt like they needed to ask some more of those clarifying questions. And so they brought someone back in to ask them some of those things that they had concerns about. And that's why they did a second interview, to handle some of that stuff. And I know that's,
Is that the primary use of a second interview, is to ask those questions you wanted to ask in the first one but couldn't?
We use secondary interviews for a couple different things. One, it could be that second interview is another tier. So I'm a building principal, so I have my interview committee, which is usually my building people and me. Then the second interview would go to like the district level, the superintendent, or I might be involved in that. It could be for clarifying, or it could be we had a robust applicant pool, we've narrowed them down, and now they've met the second tier, and so we're narrowing
Okay.
them down as we go to hire. Sorry, I don't want to speak for the district. I've just been actively engaged in this, including today.
yeah, I mean, I would agree, there's probably some follow-up questions if you might have something with that, but we try and stick to that specific area.
To
And
the
you
point
can-
where you have to turn in your notes, like if you write responses to the questions I ask, we have to keep those on file in case we get sued. So you do have to ask the same
I
questions.
was going to
Yeah, I
ask
mean,
if we
that's,
keep those on file.
that's just best practice to ask so that everybody's being graded consistently and fairly.
And-
And then
and
there's
I-
clarifying.
I'm not saying I have a problem with
questions.
everybody being asked the same question. I'm just saying inevitably, like, I mean, you're going to, I mean, have a
A follow-up
clarifying
question.
clarifying question.
But it's still going to be
that-
centered around that same subject
Yeah.
area that you're discussing.
There is some discretion, like it's not going to be an invalid interview if you don't, but then you need to document what you asked and what they answered, and that it was a follow-up and tie it to the question that was agreed upon by the committee or the district, however it goes.
Okay. Under 8, the post-interview, it says the interview team will meet and discuss their individual evaluations. Is there like a time that do they do that right then?
We
or
typically
they-
do it right after.
Okay.
They complete scales prior to that, though, right? Like,
So they do that during the interview or
yeah,
post the interview.
anonymous,
and then
or
we
like
would-
privately, and then
Correct.
you discuss after everything's.
Correct.
You normally give a little bit of time between each interview so they can fill that out.
Adam, is it still the practice that the evaluations is done in a ranking format where they rank candidates from 1 through whatever?
So right now, there's a rubric under each question that kind of has a 1 through 5, and then there's a total score based upon that. Then we discuss at the end, after we kind of use that information to discuss then who's the top, 3
To add up
candidates.
the points and talk about who the highest score.
So in the interview committee itself, how do we pick the interview committee? You know what I'm saying? I mean, because I know it's going to be different for every building or every, what, how do we go about picking the interview committee?
So, I mean, obviously, Adam's in on most of them.
Right.
As a central office with him. And, if it's a certain building, we'll look into that building principal. If it's an area where we may need, say it's custodian, obviously we try and have Eric on that, those type of situations. If it's a specific thing, when we look at coaches, obviously that's going to probably be the building principal and the
Athletic
AD.
director.
At the junior high, it's probably going to be Pat Curry. Depending on where it is, the severity of it or the level of it, we might include an administrator from central office as well. Adam, you can probably speak some more to that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want it to just be one person. We try and have 3.
Right.
We haven't done any administrative interviews this year, but I can tell you when we have administrative interviews for principals' jobs, a lot of times that's people that are going to be central office people. They're going to be down here, and we will have somebody from special ed. We'll have somebody from elementary, secondary, and then that's when I sit in on the interviews as well as the superintendent, and then Adam will be on those as well.
The only other thing, I don't want to hog all the questions
We
here.
can all just take turns.
So, under number 9, selection and offer, under the 4th bullet point, I'm sure this is what it means. I'm sure this is what it's intended, and if not, I apologize, but I'm sure this is what it means, but I think just being clear, it says upon request, the Board of Education may receive, I think it probably should, to be clear, it should say upon the request of any board member, it would be provided to the entire Board of Education. Because it makes
Right,
it
if
sound like
one
we have to
asks,
have.
If one-
everyone
so if
gets
one
it.
asks,
Yeah.
everybody gets it, yes.
And everybody
Yes,
gets it.
if one asks,
Because
everybody gets
it makes it sound like we have to have a meeting, vote on it, and go, yes, we want them, and by then it'd be too late. So,
Yep, on the request from one board member.
all right?
So Adam, you got any more?
I don't have any.
Okay, so no, I just
know
want
we have more.
I want to go back before we go though, because back to 7, bullet point 1. I think we need to just put in there that it will be shared with the interview committee.
This is just an aesthetic thing that literally just occurred to me. It's not anything major, but for future policies, like, it might be helpful instead of like the bullet point to have like A, B, under it for when
Yeah.
we're- Sorry.
Right,
I
I was
thought of
counting
that.
bullet
Sorry.
points
So you can call it out,
earlier.
yeah.
We can update that on the.
Yeah, that's,
Wow.
it's just an aesthetic thing, honestly,
No, I
but it
agree.
helps be specific.
Some stuff was added in there with the bullet points. At first we went into more detail.
So, sorry, what did we just say for bullet point 1? under
So
7?
1, it sounds like everybody was wanting the allotted 1 hour. They wanted that shared with the interview committee prior to that. So we'll look at a timely
Right, are
manner.
we specifying how long, or do we just agree more than an hour? I can go either way on it. I don't know what the board wants.
So, I mean, if you're going to share it, you're going to send it out, I don't, we just have to we will talk with them about confidentiality and the responsibilities of those things, and it has to be followed, and if we start having problems with that, then we'll
Then we
address
can
with,
readdress. Then
they're gonna
we'll
have to
address
come to
with
the
those
office
specific
and see it,
people.
yeah.
But we will,
But I
because
think at least
that's been
the
a
day
practice,
before.
and that's been something that's done in the past, that's been emailed out. So we'll put that out, once you're selected, we'll give you the information a few
Another
days
option
before.
might be it's in a Google Drive where like Adam's the only owner, everybody else can only view, so then they can't be sharing that out with people too. I mean, you
Yeah.
can really lock it down.
Google Drive will be shared.
Yeah,
And I think a few
as long
days
as it's-
prior to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, did you want to go over anything else? I mean,
Did I
win over?
Did I get all the other ones that you mentioned?
We did that one, we'll change that one to any board member.
Yeah, I wrote that on there as well.
So
I think-
any
I
one
think that's-
request, but we all receive it.
Yes.
Yes,
Changing
if
about
one of us
board members.
requests it.
So I put upon
everybody
request
receives
from
it.
one board
Just
member,
as
the Board of
it
Education
saves
will,
time and,
yeah,
you know,
may receive.
Sounds good?
so,
Okay, we get it, I see what you're saying, okay.
right, just to keep this kind of in
And
order.
as I've talked to a few of you separately is, when we present this can obviously be held like Lori went to hold earlier, and we can go back in executive session and talk about a specific person and share, bring some of that information and talk about that more so than just the resumes. We can actually talk about the interview and how that went and discuss that stuff with each of you. Obviously, we can't do that in an open session, but that is something. And I think that hasn't happened since Adam and I have been in these positions, but I know that has been done in the past where we brought some stuff in and talked about. And we can bring that documentation and we can bring people on the interview committee depending on their availability. Because a lot of times when it's principals, they might have things going on in their building that night. But we try and do that as well. So those requests, if you want to hold something, we can do that. Obviously, if we know ahead of time, we can make sure the right people are here to discuss it.
To just keep us organized here, why don't we start at one end and go to the other? Does that make sense?
And that way, if we
So,
cancel
Erica-
something out,
Yeah, right, it might hit somebody's question and,
Yeah. This is pretty standard based on other districts that I've worked in. One question I have, just for clarity, this is intended to be a sequential, right? Like, using what we just talked about, asking for the applications and materials. That's happening after the hire offer's been made. We're not
Correct.
asking that at like step one when you're selecting interview
that's what
candidates.
we're looking at, yeah.
is that it for you, or?
I think that's all I have for now, yeah.
All right, Randy?
So one question I had about the point system. So we're going to grade and we're going to have a point system, but it sounded like that wasn't going to be the determining factor to rank them 1, 2, 3, or 4. If the points isn't the determining factor on ranking them, what is the determining factor?
So that's one of the factors, like we asked the candidate or the interview committee to kind of tally up their points. And then in addition, there were conversations even happened today with, who perhaps we didn't ask, enough questions that we felt like were fitting that particular. So we wanted to bring that person back, even though their points might not have been at the highest level, but we knew that they had subbed in the district and their interview wasn't great. We want to go ahead and give them a second interview, but these are some questions in that second interview that we feel like are important to ask.
So those questions in the second interview, are they going to be the same questions that you asked the original candidates, or do they get additional questions?
So those will be new questions based upon, so like for example, today, we wanted to ask some specific behavioral questions about kind of supervision of students, interacting with students. How are you going to manage that for the position we were interviewing today? Because that's not something that we kind of touched on heavily in the first round of interviews. So kind of targeting those interview questions back to what are we looking for? Is it a cultural fit? Is it kind of meeting the needs of what we're looking for within that next round, if we haven't touched on that? But it still would be a standard set of questions in that next round of interview
So it would be a next round for a couple of people or a next round for one person?
Typically, we bring back the top 2 to 3 people.
Okay. Then the reason I ask that is if it's so important that we have standardized questions for the initial interview, I think that you're not holding it fair by having a second round of interviews and not giving those applicants that were in the first round an opportunity to answer other questions. So you're saying you get these 6, but if I call you back, you're going to get 6 different questions that they didn't get an opportunity to answer.
But they didn't clear the first round.
And that's what I was trying to
They
clarify.
cleared
Yeah.
the first round, now
So
they're
it's
Yeah.
only for people that clear the second round. It's not like, hey, we didn't
Give you
ask
another
enough
chance.
questions to this one person. Let's call that
Right,
person
so
in and
it's-
ask questions.
It's a
Right, no,
yeah,
it's-
it's
Yeah,
whoever.
that's what I was
Based
trying
on
like
to
a
their
tournament
scores.
style. You
Yeah.
got, like, a
So,
bracket.
and then another one, we had a person that we knew
March
was
Madness.
the top.
Yeah.
Just recently, but we wanted to bring them back in because we wanted to make sure that they were going to culturally fit with some of our other stuff. So we did ask different questions, but they were still the ones that was going to be
That
the
were gonna be the top.
recommendation.
Okay,
So,
that makes
and then your score might be different than my score, and that's why we have the conversations. Because then then we can kind of talk it out a little bit and be like, wait a minute now, yeah, I scored that down, but I see what you're saying now, and then collaboration to come to consensus on the right person.
I have a question related to the points a little bit, because anyone that's conducted interviews, that it's been an interview, knows that sometimes interviews don't go great, and that's not always an accurate representation of who you are. So is there any consideration or anything in place in terms of like almost rubricizing like experience or references, anything to that degree where like, because that also factors into a
Or maybe
points
the
kind of
person is
situation.
just a terrible interviewer.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
can tell you, actually this year, I hired a new student teacher. He knows, so he's fine, it's fine. I don't care if he sees this. His interview was terrible, but he basically auditioned for me all school year because he's student taught. And so he was the one.
I feel like that when I'm sitting on interviews, because obviously a lot of my time's for an administrator position. I look at that as well, knowing their body of work. They've been working in our district
Yeah.
for how long and see what they do. So I get it. An interview's a part of it and a big part of it. But I look at some of that stuff as I'm making these decisions myself. And that's when I start to have those conversations with the group
Everyone
as
else,
well.
yeah. Because like, it's hard, you need to have a points system because you have to have some kind of system and documentation, but that is limited if you're only scoring the interview. And so I just wanted to know like
Because some people are great interviews and they just don't.
or terrible employees.
Yeah.
Learned that lesson too.
And that's that's the follow-up questions that what we call references and things
Yeah.
along those lines. Adam's
That was
been conducting
actually
more
my-
interviews.
That was my next question was,
Sorry. I didn't mean to steal it
are
from you,
we
sorry.
building a scale for,
She
hey,
stole
this
your
is-
th- she stole
this
your
is
thunder.
superior and this is under, so
Yeah.
it's the same question, are we going to have something like that?
Okay. You have anything else?
Yeah, I do. I just want to
Go ahead.
make a statement. This is kind of to the entire board and to the community. Last few days for me has been kind of stressful. Like I've been trying to review all the information and making sure that we're making good decisions for the district and the community. So I thought it was important that I shared just kind of a blanket statement for everybody to think about as we get ready to vote, on a new policy. I want to highlight the importance of transparency and accountability and trust within district governance, emphasizing that withholding information from board members kind of undermines our ability to make good decisions and to fulfill our duties and foster an environment that undermines what we're trying to do. It's easy to scrutinize whether decisions are being made in the best interest of students or the community or driven by self-interest or administrative favoritism when policies are being presented. So it's easy for the community to kind of scrutinize us. So I think it's important that we take these things seriously when we're voting. We need to have honest leadership, integrity, and open communication because we don't want past abuse to come back and get us. During the hiring process, information needs to be shared with openness and trust. I encourage that you as the community remain vigilant and hold elected officials accountable, ensuring that policies prioritize the district's best interest over individual and administrative agendas. We as a district need to foster a culture of integrity and shared responsibility. I think it's important that we all do the right thing no matter what the outcome is. So that's really all I had to share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Becky, you're up.
Becky?
I don't have a statement. Only question, on the questions and the interviews, how do we come up with the questions? Is it you or like the interview committee? Do they get to like have input, the principals or whoever, or how is that done?
So currently, we develop them based upon what the job description is, and that's kind of the first round. Then when we bring people in for the second round, that's when we'll ask for input of, did we miss something? Are we looking for something specific? But that first round is typically developed by the HR office.
Okay.
And it's pretty consistent, like you haven't been here full year yet?
This is
About to be?
I'm almost done with my first year.
Almost done, not done, almost completed, and you're
Yeah.
continuing. Those I would assume are then stored, and like next year you would probably do those same unless like something was glaring that you had to make a change, but
Yeah,
like,
so it's been
it's not like you're inventing the wheel every time you have an interview for a
So
job.
it's been something we've been working on updating as I've started, just
Mm-hmm.
kind of reviewing those questions. But, open to doing something different. That's just what we've done this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if like a print or somebody on the interview committee would say, hey, this is really important, you would,
Yeah.
like, I don't know what the situation would be, but obviously like a certain kind of teacher or somebody that works well in their building, if they have something that's important in their building or something.
As long as you get that in there prior to
Right.
giving the questions to
Yes,
everybody.
Yes, ahead of time, once they know they're on the interview committee or whatever.
Being on many interviews as a principal, I know that there's a big bank of questions that that you look at and, you're hitting some of those key points
Right.
for the different positions.
Right.
So I think, and what Adam has is that bank
Right.
that has been developed over the years, and so it's just putting that together.
Right.
I think it's honestly, from when I was on committees as a building principal, it was sometimes walking in at the last minute and putting questions together. So we're ahead of the game a little bit on that, so people
Sure.
can kind of see what they are and have a better understanding. And well, even then, when we were just putting questions together, a question that I may have had may not be the question that I asked. We normally would just go in order and ask the questions.
Do the interviewers get to add a question, or is this just come straight from HR? These are the questions we want you to ask, kind of thing?
Currently, it comes from HR.
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious.
Because there's,
An interviewer though said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make that noise. If an interviewer said, like, hey, I think we should ask this, is that something that can be added?
yeah, so
I mean,
right now, there's...
if it makes
there's-
sense.
Yeah, so right now, the benefit of us doing it currently is just that we've tried to have a consistent rubric that gives kind of look-fors to that 1 to 5 rating scale. So there's kind of prompts that you're looking for of like, did they give a detailed response? Were they missing this key thing? So that's, it's not that you, as long as we're consistent in asking those questions though, if there's something that's missing, we can add that at that time. But I think we
The
could
last
also,
minute keeps the preparation out of it, unfortunately,
Yeah.
just to set a rubric exactly how you're looking for.
I mean, I would think most people, like, if they knew this position was coming open, like, a building principal might say, this is important for my building. But I don't, obviously, they shouldn't wait till the day of the interview.
Yeah.
That should come ahead of time. But that's all.
Tom, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and what Adam says is absolutely correct. I mean, most of the questions that are developed are germane to that particular position to be filled. But more importantly, there is an AP that we had, that the board has, or that has been developed by the press, which talks about the questions not to be asked. And that is just as important as,
Sure.
Right.
as developing.
You can ask, yes.
Right.
Because you can get.
Don't want to get in trouble there.
Yeah.
By asking.
Yes,
You got any kids?
Like a simple question, what did you make at your last job?
right.
Boom,
Right.
that's a no-no. You don't ask that.
I also learned this year, because my school, we had a favorite of like, hey, we're having a potluck, what are you bringing? Just to like get to know somebody. But we're tightening up our hiring practices this year, and we had to eliminate that because that's not relevant to the job, and you could show discrimination if I like what someone else is bringing versus, I mean, we obviously wouldn't decide the hiring on that,
Well, I
but
don't like
to that
spaghetti.
extent, like those questions have to be accounted for, and
Right.
so that was sad. I had to get rid of. And what are you reading? I like that one too. You have to be very.
See,
Careful what you
that's
ask.
unfair,
Reading.
because I'd be like, nothing.
And then if I didn't hire you, then it'd be like I was trying to get a bribe.
Do you have anything else?
I think that's it.
Tom?
Yeah, I've got a few here. One of them is on the rubric that we're talking about, and we've got the, say on a total score, is every question weighted equally, or is there weighting to the questions? And what I'm getting at is, I'm sure in terms of importance, not every question is as important as another one. There's, the second question may not be as important as the fifth, yet do they score equally in the rankings?
so currently there's not a weighting system. It's something
Okay.
we can look into, but that's, it's just a standard 1 through 5 for each question, and then they total the score.
Okay. Okay.
I think that might get a little tricky if we started weighting things.
I don't know. I feel like I'm not saying you have to
I get what
weight
you're
every
saying.
question, but there are certain ones that are going to, like, okay, they better do good on this one, or they better have a
Well, I
solid
would say if
answer.
it's on the interview question list, all of them they better do well on it.
But you think they're all weighted equally?
I think they should be all weighted equally, because if one's less important, then they probably don't need to be on the interview list. Like, because a lot of times people have too many questions in interviews too.
Right. Okay. Let's see, what was the next one? One of these is kind of already answered. This was something that's come up, people have asked me in the past, and this had to do with people who are not chosen, who we do not hire. Do we offer any kind of feedback? Not that we offer it. If they ask, do we offer any kind of feedback? Because I've had several people come to me who said, I asked for what I could do better on my resume, or I asked for what, I could have done better in the interview, and they pretty much got ghosted. And this, not you. But I was just wondering if we're willing to do that, because I feel like we should. If I'm not saying if everyone asks, okay, that's a time problem, but I feel like it's probably not that many people that ask about that kind of a thing, and we probably could answer.
Yeah. I have not done that. I would tell you I have some concerns about that just because I think you're going to engage in some conversations that you're going to...
Not prepared for.
Yeah, you're going to have to be fairly objective, obviously, factual. But I think internally, I'm happy to meet with, often we have internal candidates to interview for positions. Those conversations I'm absolutely comfortable having.
Okay.
Because I think that's a different scenario versus an external candidate who applied or maybe not chosen for an interview that I'm not sure. I would have to defer to Tom legally, kind of what we would be dipping into something that I just haven't, that's not an experience that I've had and not sure that, that's necessarily what
I can tell you for myself, last year, sitting in on some of those administrative interviews, I did have some staff come and ask me some different things that they could have done. And in those interviews, I wasn't voting on anything, and I just talked to them about some things that they could have looked at, maybe answering different when they asked me about their resume. But it was internal candidates that came to me outside of the interview process and just kind of gave them some guidance on, almost like when you're mentoring somebody, when you're a principal and somebody's working on their admin degree, you're working with them on stuff, those type of conversations. But again, it was our current staff.
Okay. I know there's a section in there, and we've talked quite a bit about, if the board asks, that every board member gets the resumes and such. Wouldn't it also make sense for the board so that if we're going to be digging into one, which I know is a slippery slope too, but that we would also have the reasoning from the committee in terms of why they selected a top candidate, just so we have a full picture?
I guess what information would you be looking for?
Maybe the scoring, maybe it could even be in a executive session or something like that, where just so we have a full picture if it's getting to that point.
If it's a certain one you want, and we're like,
Yeah,
you're really concerned.
Here's my thing. We got to be careful with it. I mean, we hire people to make these decisions.
Yeah.
But if we're going to be digging that deep, does it not make sense to get the full picture?
I would think if it's something that was going to be held and there was some concern about it, that, we could definitely bring that into executive session and have a conversation about that.
Yeah, but I don't think for every hire they recommend, they should be justifying to us why we're doing it, because their justification is always going to be, this is the best person for the job, and that's what we
Okay.
hired and trusted them to do.
And I don't think we're going to be asking for names and all that information on every hire.
No, I don't think we are either.
It's upon request.
So if there's a
Yeah.
controversial one and we need to go to executive session.
Right.
I think providing that information,
And
maybe the score sheet.
Yeah, and I
would
think if
help
you,
us.
I think if you guys
and
had-
that's what I'm getting at. That's what I mean, yeah.
And I'd love to bring that to executive session to have that conversation
We've done that
there.
before in the past,
Yeah.
I think, so I'm,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if that needed to be mentioned in here.
I just have a
because
question.
it's left
Is this
out.
like something we would do with every teacher that's hired, or are we
Maybe
talking about?
Man, I
like
hope
an
not.
administrator?
I think it's something I think it was something somebody was looking to hold an executive, and then we knew that ahead of time, which most of the time, if something's going to be held, we do know ahead of time, and we would have that information, and we can talk about it
Yeah.
in executive.
Yeah, I don't think that's
I think this is pretty much, I wouldn't codify in here because I don't even know what you would say for that, but I think that's a general practice on any actionable item that our board has. If we need to
Correct.
hold it, and then if we have to hold it for personnel reasons, et cetera, which this would fall under, you would go to an executive session because you have
Right.
privacy issues with that.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. I'm good. Anything else I have has either been answered or it's just not really relevant, so I'm good.
Did we, so you're done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lori?
Well, the interview team committee members, I just had kind of a question about that when it comes to administrators. I mean, of course, teachers and so forth, not. But I just had a question about, like, they would be administrators in the board office that are interviewing. Is it possible to think of, like, maybe having a board member there, too, for an administrator to do the interviews? Reason being, it's a little bit more representative of Granite City. Not that, we don't trust the people that are giving their opinion and stuff, but they may be out of town and maybe not know certain
So-
things in Granite City, you know, that people who live here would know?
So I will tell you, as I was actually saving that to the end
Oh,
to have a
sorry.
discussion. No, you didn't know, right? You didn't know. But I know when I came on the board, for administrators, for principals and above, the interviews were held in here, well, not in here, they were held in another room, but we sat in on them. We didn't ask questions, we just basically observed.
Yeah.
And then after the interviews were done, the committee left, they did their discussion, they did their, hey, this is our rubric, this is our choice, and they came back in and kind of presented their choice. And it was held in an executive session meeting, and so at that point, I believe that would allow us to at least ask, that gives them the opportunity to go, hey, this is why we chose candidate A over candidate C. I don't think the rubric, I think we've discovered, I think we know this sitting here, I don't think the rubric is the end-all be-all, because you might have somebody who interviews terribly, and their rubric might be a little bit lower,
Yeah.
but you're like, they have this experience, and we think that they are the best fit. So it's kind of like, I'll equate it to taking bids. We take bids, but if one is we have a company and we're like, there's no way we're taking that company, we've just done business with them
It's way
before.
too low and you know it
It's way
can't
too
be
low
done.
or whatever, don't necessarily take the lowest bidder, and you justify why you do that. And so I would like us to go back to administrators and above, principals and above, having our executive session meetings and doing the interviews like that. That's what I would like for us to do. I don't think we can have one board member who just goes to,
Yeah, I was just thinking
know,
just
so-
so that there's some representation.
right, no,
But it would-
I agree.
I have some representation from Granite City as well, though.
What's
So,
that?
I said I represent Granite City
I
pretty
know
well, though,
that.
too. So just saying that, just throwing that out
know
there.
you live
Yeah,
here.
Okay.
So that was something I wanted to discuss, because it wasn't necessarily in here. And so that is something I wanted to discuss. I was just gonna
Yeah,
wait to
no
the end,
offense,
but since
Donnie.
we're going now, that is something I would like us to see us. I don't know that it has to be written down necessarily in this, but,
Yeah,
it
because
could
it
be.
says interview team members,
Yeah.
communicates the members.
Well, we would not be interview team members.
You'd be
We would just
observing.
be
Oh,
observing.
observers,
Yeah, we
yeah.
would just be
Observers,
observing.
Yes.
Because the interview committee would do the interviews. Like I said, I've only done this one time, and then previous administration got rid of it. I did this, well, we've done this, a couple of us up here have done this one
I
time.
have not. I was not able to participate, which I'll get to that point in a moment.
Were you gone?
Huh?
What?
I wasn't able to participate in observing interviews, but I'll get to that point in a
Oh,
minute when I
okay.
speak.
And so, I would like to see us go back to that.
I remember when I interviewed as a teacher, the entire school board was there interviewing me.
I don't know that I want to do every teacher.
All right.
That's what I mean. I was like,
We
it
hear
was
a lot
very
of teachers and a
intimidating.
lot of other people that, but I feel like us being involved in the administrators kind of gives us, when we look and go, oh, the interview committee for the next hire is so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, we can look and go, we sat in on the interviews and the choices and things like that of, this principal, that central admin guy, and it gives you just that much more, makes you feel
Insight.
better, yeah.
Insight.
That I know, we did hear these and chose these and what have you. So that's my opinion.
It's no secret to the board, I think this is very problematic, and here are the reasons why. One, our job as a school board is to employ the superintendent, and we delegate authority to him and his administration to run the hiring process. We are not managers. ISB is very clear on that. We are not managers, and managers are the ones that hire. Two, while I get what you're saying, having the insights, that will create inequity in our board because certain ones of us cannot ever attend those meetings. And so why should one of 7 have the privilege or advantage, so to speak, to observe those whenever we could address all of this collectively in executive session? 3, kind of on point 1, we're trusting our superintendent and his administration to do these. So if we feel it necessary to be in those meetings, those interviews, I feel like we're inherently saying we don't trust our administration. And if that's the case, we have some other issues to work through.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I trust our administration, and I'll be the first one to tell you that when I asked to go back to this, I didn't trust our administration.
Yeah. What do we have to gain? Like, the inside, yes, we
I'm
can
just
get
going to
that.
tell you that I think we gain a lot. I think the process, we see the process in action. I'm going to tell you, I can't talk about the interview we saw, but obviously you look and candidate A might be like, man, that was terrible. You know, in my mind, that was a terrible interview. As far as being able to do it, I mean, we'll just have to schedule it like we normally schedule a special meeting. It might have to be a little bit later so that, like you, who works
Yeah.
till 5, can be
But
there.
I just don't know what we stand to gain from it. And fourthly, I feel like it kind of goes against other commonly accepted legislative practices in our country at various levels. There has to be a checks and balance, and us hiring and approving is that check and balance to a recommendation brought to us. So if we're participating in that, then how are we checking that process?
I don't know that you're
I think
participating and saying we're picking that one. You're still looking at their, you know, when they come in and go, I want candidate C, you know, that gives us the opportunity. And I think I think we can point, if we weren't sitting out here, I think I can point to people that this board might have said,
Right.
why are we picking that person over that person?
But then that's when we should be asking
But you won't
that
know that if you're
administration.
not there. I had no idea. When we have, for instance, like principals that we're going to hire, say that aren't in our district, I know nothing about them, zero about them. So when you look at somebody and you're like, I'm just taking your recommendation really blindly, right? I mean.
But that's what we do every time we approve any action item.
No doubt about it. But I think in administration, you have a little bit more to lose.
As an administrator, I would tell you that a principal job is not any more important than a classroom job, than a custodial job, and I'm not being a Pollyanna about that, I'm being honest. And so if we're going to do that for one over others, I think that sends a bad message to the people we're hoping to attract to our district.
I disagree. So,
That's fine, we can agree to disagree.
anybody else?
No, I worry about the slippery slope part of it, because if we start doing it with one, and then we do it with another, and we do it with another, and
It's going to be easy to get
I'm
back
going
to
to
where we
call
were
out
before.
the elephant in the room that we're dancing around right now, is that there have been previous boards that were known for completely ignoring committee choices and
Yes.
throwing in who they wanted, and that hasn't always worked
And
out.
we still were pushed to blindly follow.
Here's the thing, I mean, I understand what you're saying about the
Yeah.
slippers, I get that, like, I don't want people to meddle inside of our hires, I think that's fraudulent. But it doesn't matter if I'm sitting in the room or not, I'm not gonna blindly vote yes to something I don't have the information for. So whether you let me sit in here and watch the interview process so I can trust that the process is happening, or we just get here and I want everything held for executive session,
And then go
and we
on
spend hours back there doing it. It doesn't matter which way you do it. I'm not going to trust it. And it's not me personally, I'm just saying the process.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether we're watching the interviews or not watching the interviews. It's not going to change how we operate here. I think for comfort and trust, I think having a board or board members watch, now you have built some credibility and trust that the process is happening correctly. I'm not saying it's not,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I can understand both sides of it. It can be very intimidating for boards sitting in on an already under pressure candidate trying to do an interview.
Right.
But I also see the flip side where having a board here may also keep from the people doing the interview process doing the wrong thing. I
At
mean,
what
it could
point,
go
yeah,
both ways.
yeah.
I mean, it could.
At what point, like, we have all talked about, like, the rationale behind this, or in favor of it is, to build that trust and, trust and credibility, whatever. So at what point do we say, we've built our trust and credibility? We don't need to keep watching the interviews. And also, what message are we sending that? Because we're basically telling you right now, we trust you, but we don't trust you, and we want to watch you and see how it's done. So let's play it out. Let's say we go and we're like, yeah, your interview process is good, we'll stop. Then we stop, now we've created inconsistencies from certain interviews to others, not even the same round. So it creates more inconsistencies in
So
the
that
hiring
apparently has
process than
happened in the
necessary.
past, right?
Right, but
Because
we're
it-
not the past,
so-
we're like in the
so-
future now.
Right,
We're planning for the future.
and yes, and we are planning for the future. Superintendent Harris is not always going to be the superintendent. And
And when things don't
And-
happen the way we like them, we talk to the superintendent about it. And if it still isn't getting changed, then we follow through with that in our evaluation process of that individual every
I
year.
don't see that, I don't know that that's happened in the past.
That would
so,
be my only
Because we
thing
didn't have a
is-
good evaluation, I mean, we can be
And as far
honest,
as
we
the
didn't have a
slippery
good
Trust
evaluation.
now, but
We,
for me, we were at a place where I didn't trust, now we are, so if you make something.
So why
like
is
it
this current
states-
administration expected to bear the burden of feelings remaining from the past?
Well, I think we were trying to change it before, or we
yeah,
had discussed, and it
this isn't
didn't
new.
happen.
It's not like
So-
we've never talked
No,
about
we've
this
talked about this
before.
before, and our points have all been the same before.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying, like,
And
why?
before,
So
we
we're just
really
missing-
should have
yeah.
changed it, and we
I
didn't.
disagree, I don't think we
So,
ever should have changed it.
So, and as far as the slippery slope, I don't know where that, if one board member wanted to meddle by themselves in it, it could happen, right? They can call whoever they want and make, and do things.
But that's
to
on
me,
that board
having-
member, not us giving an open platform for them to do
So
it.
if there's 7 of us sitting here, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm willing to call out a board member if they are obviously trying to manipulate the system. Well, if you're doing it behind the scenes, no one sees it until it's too late. So, I mean, so as far as the slippery slope, I don't know that that's.
I would say if we go this route, we also need to treat it similar to, even though we would not be a hiring committee. If you're going to sit in on the interview for a given position, you need to sit in on every interview
to
for
sit
that
in on
position.
every-
If you
every-
can't make one, you can't make any of them.
Yes.
Because you
And
can't
I
have
totally-
you can't
and I
have a
totally
complete
agree.
view of it.
So,
And to one of the issues we had when we were doing interviews of the administrators is the scheduling of them, whether we could do them in all in one night versus having to do them in 2 nights, because then we have situations where you really want to do an internal candidate on the second night, and when the questions could be told to her or him, as far as by a board member, because that was a concern raised by.
Even another interviewee.
You gotta be careful.
yeah.
Even another interviewee could share the question, you know, I mean, oh, by the way, they asked me this, yeah.
And also,
I
you're creating a
agree.
different circle, I mean, even going 2 nights, you're creating an inequity and, there's like, it could be different. You may as well ask them different questions, because you don't know what's going on in those 2 nights.
Are we, well, would we be considering, like, not the full, we're talking about the second interview would be with, and that's what I'm getting the impression. So it would be 2 or 3 people is all it would be.
You're saying, we're
wouldn't-
saying board members should observe the
No,
second
I'm
interview?
just saying, I don't think they would start with, if there's 27 people that have applied for a
Well,
position or
we're
something.
not going to interview
No,
27
they're not.
people,
Right, but
but
I
you don't
mean,
always have a second
How
round of
many do
interviews.
you, oh, I see, okay. I wasn't sure
Yeah,
about
if
that.
there's an interview,
If
Okay.
there's
there's,
not always
if there's
that.
somebody that's the
Okay.
top candidate,
So
and
how many
honestly, when
people
you're
could
looking
there
at an
be?
administrative position, you try and narrow it down.
Yeah, if you have a
people and
lot,
bring them
you
in.
talk about, what,
Yeah.
6, 7 people maybe? That could be a long,
Be a
yeah.
long night.
I wish we had
There
our
were
board
3.
training already, because ISB will say very clearly that board members should not be present at interviews, because it's not following through with the delegating of authority. And if you all look at other districts, that's bad practice.
I mean, my
Go ahead.
past.
I started to say, Adam,
well,
you
yeah,
I feel like you have
that's
something.
not anything that I've ever had an experience with. I understand that's been, kind of done back and forth. In my previous experience, we had this is just
Yeah.
food for thought, but we had executive session prior to the board meeting, and that was where those conversations were had, where, you knew the list of names of people that were recommended for X position, and then that was the time where when we were discussing a principal or whatever that candidate may be, we could bring in.
So you had the executive session first.
Yes, so instead of kind of what we do now is you would hold that item, we would go into executive. My experience was the executive was prior to the board meeting. So those conversations were had, and then typically, at least everybody, you may still vote no if that wasn't, but there was conversations had where you could get those specific questions answered prior to taking action on
Is that a
specific
time then
item.
when you could see the rubric and,
Correct.
get that kind of stuff?
Correct. So
Okay.
that's like walking in, that's just been my experience where I attended every executive session as the assistant superintendent, and I was able to answer questions on behalf of the interview committee, or if we knew ahead of time there was specifically something that somebody wanted, we would bring, that interview committee or something to the table.
I'd be amenable to that because I think it gets to the point, and I think Mr. Christie made this earlier, he's not going to vote blindly for anybody, neither will he, but to him, it's the same as being in executive session or watching the interview. If we take us out of that interview, that alleviates my concerns of inequity around the board because only certain people went. It doesn't have us present in the interview, so it's getting around that, and there's nothing wrong with us asking. Now, I don't think it should be open to where we're constantly grilling and they have to completely make a court case every time they try to hire somebody, so I would caution the board not to do that. I don't think any of us would.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a reasonable compromise.
And that's something Adam and I have been talking about a little bit. I said, hey, I don't know if we're there yet or not, but I think it's something we could look at. Obviously, it caused us to change some times up a little bit and look at some different stuff, but it's going to keep your in executive a lot. We won't be here wee hours into the night.
Well, and we've done a good job over the last few years of not going into executive session
Yes.
too much, and I don't want us to get back to that, because that's where, if you're talking about community trust and accountability, I don't want the public seeing us doing a lot of work behind the scenes, because they shouldn't,
Right.
you know?
I kind of
But
like that this
sometimes
is
you
out
need a
here,
bunch of-
honestly.
Yeah. And
I think
that's why the discussion's really
My
good.
only question to Eric's proposal, like when you're hiring an admin or something, just if, I'm not saying Adam would do, this is not, if Adam's saying, this is who I want, and the other people on the interview committee are afraid to go against him because they're afraid for their job,
So it's like a check of that kind of power.
Yes,
Not-
I mean,
oversight.
because if
Position
Adam's like,
oversight. Yeah,
I
that makes
want,
sense.
I'm
Yeah,
not saying
so-
you would do, not
Yeah.
you. What if we have a new HR?
Yeah.
What if?
Well,
or
because
what
we
if
are
a new
making
superintendent-
policies around the organization, not around the people.
Right, it should be,
Yeah.
so like, or a superintendent who's like, I'm bringing in all these people, you vote for my principal no matter what. Like, I think that could be a checks and balances where
I
the
think it's
board just
oversight.
said,
Oversight of what's happening.
that is the
Yeah.
positive to your proposal, I think.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay. So, do you have any more questions?
No, I think I started
Sure,
something.
there.
I was just questioning it. Sorry about that.
Don's like,
Donnie, have we answered all your questions?
We're good.
you should probably go the other way next time, because I talk a lot.
So just not to beat this dead horse, right? Is everybody good with us not being on the, because I feel like that's the only thing we don't agree with here,
Yeah.
right?
I
That-
just going back to like when we were going to vote for some administrators before, and we did have a little discussion about it, which really helped a lot, because you're like, you don't have any idea who these people are. So you're like, well, why did you choose this one? Or,
Well,
what kind of experience made you give that? There's those questions in your mind instead of just saying, yay, I'm voting for that person.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the last
mean,
one when
and-
you guys we voted, because I was in there in an executive session, and we had pretty much majority of the committee that was there. And I think that's
Yes,
one way that
and
you
could
can
answer
keep
the
your check and
questions.
balance on that. You just say, no, I don't just want the superintendent there, I want the whole committee in there, and I want to hear them talk about it, I want them to be honest.
Yeah, the interview
I mean,
committee, great.
I mean, most administrators are going to be honest,
And I think-
and they're going to hold their
And
hold their
I do-
own.
I do
Now,
think that,
moving forward, I realized that was not the case
It
in the
was not,
past.
it was not the case. They
it
were
was not
not,
the
it was
But-
not the case. So
but-
I'm going off that experience.
Yes.
We did not, because I would have conversations later with people and like,
But I don't know if
Right,
I don't know if
so-
they were all in executive session either, because I remember just recently when we
No,
did
they
that for
weren't.
this, we had everybody in there, and it was an executive session, and those conversations took place. So I think that's something that we can
Yeah, and
definitely
your
make
committee's
sure
not that
happens.
big, and then also
but I
going
still
their
don't think
voice.
that committee was honest in that meeting because a certain
No.
person was sitting in it.
They still feel,
So
Well, that's going to be the case. I mean, you can't
I
control
know, I'm just
human
saying that's the
nature.
truth about for hiring. That's just where I am on it because I think you're always, but that doesn't matter for that's
So-
the other.
so with the, it looks like we only had a couple changes into this, right? I
think you made the
specifically
amendments.
7, just so we're not going under 7, bullet point 1, 1 hour. we'll change that.
I like the Google Drive option, and will be shared a few days prior.
What's good about that too is you can, I mean, you can try to lock it down a lot, but you can also like cut off their access after a certain amount of time too. I mean, there are ways around it, but it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
100%
confidential
foolproof.
emails and
I
stuff
think a
that's
day
offered.
ahead of time
Yeah.
gives, I mean, people are so busy that,
So we changed that. Under 9, bullet point 4, we changed the Board of Education to upon the request of any board member.
The Board of Education will then receive, yeah.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Board of Education will then receive.
yeah.
I don't think there's
Other than
another
that, I didn't have
change.
any amendments. I mean, we talked about a lot of things, but I think it was a lot of clarification. Adam, are those the only changes that you had in there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to say.
So with those
Eric, John.
changes,
You know, as you all know, I represent the board. One of the items under 9 is bullet point 3. And this is something that is a new practice, Don, and the reason I bring this up, can you explain, is the letter of, the formal offer of employment, is that going to be an oral type thing? Or are you going to submit it in writing, or have you thought about that process yet?
So, yeah, we just-
we've discussed, I don't know if it's going to be formal or not, but just so everybody knows, one of the things that we did talk about, and that is this bullet point, is the way it's done today is we decide, for example, we're going to hire Randy Christie. We don't ever tell him that he's the guy.
Finds out on Facebook Live.
Maybe up to a month later, he finds out on Facebook Live that he's not been told this is his salary. He's not been told this is the benefits that you would receive. So he finds out on Facebook Live. B, we then call him and go, hey, this is where you'd fall on this. This is where you'd fall on this. This is, maybe what you're having. And he goes, no, that wasn't what I thought. And now we are another board meeting to try to get the second candidate. In this bullet point, what they're trying to do is go, we're going to be able to call candidate A, our number one guy, and go,
Your
hey,
recommendation.
here, you're our recommendation. We are not telling you you're hired, but we are telling you you're our recommendation. This is where you would fall. These are the things, blah, 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 blah. At the next board meeting, you will be put up for vote. So at least he knows that he or she, I'm sorry, I don't want to offend
Were they?
anybody. He or she will know that they are the pick pending board approval. And I mean, let's face it, even though we've all had this major discussion, a large percentage of the time, the recommended person is normally the person that we end up hiring. So that's all bullet point 3 is. But to Tom's question, is that just going to be a phone call? Is that going to be a letter saying you're our person?
So for most candidates, it'll be a phone call because I think they're typically as a back and forth conversation,
Right.
because for example, we don't tell anyone for years of experience officially where they fall until we receive the verification of employment for like a teacher.
Right.
So we could have verbally, like, if you provide this, this is where you would fall on the salary scale.
Yeah.
We can honor up to 10 years of experience, et cetera. But we can't truly verify that until the board approval. Everything would say pending board approval and pending
Yeah.
completion of paperwork, pending background check, all those things, plus, verification of
So it's-
employment to get experience.
So it's a phone call, which is what I will tell
Yeah.
you that I thought it would be.
Right.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and the reason I brought up is primarily Randy's. The school code grants exclusive jurisdiction to U7 to hire employees. Don Harris cannot, he makes recommendations
And then we
to the two guys, but the school code vests exclusively with the school board.
So even when he
Official
calls them.
decision.
Yeah, and that
That's not
policy
official, and
530
he
that
had-
we talked
And they have to
about.
explain that to him, that this is pending board approval.
That's pending board approval. That's a
Yeah.
big
So-
phrase.
So not to get into semantics a little bit, but like, that's not really a formal offer, is it? Prior to us,
Well,
like, it's kind of an informal, like,
It's an
you're letting
informal
them know of our recommendation.
Yeah.
Conditional.
We do,
Your
at the
formal
library,
thing will
we
come
do
in
a
a hiring
tentative
later.
offer.
But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something we've never done in the past, at least since I've been in this district.
So when this was written, or human resources will extend a formal offer. Are we saying that's a formal phone call?
I think we need to
Or
change
we
that
call it
to
a
I think we should change that to
informal.
informal, yeah.
Yeah,
To me, when I read
Or-
the formal,
or
would be
even a
like the letter we
conditional.
send them
Or a
after we've hired them.
Condition being.
Yeah, the condition that you turn in everything you're supposed to turn in, and then we
and the
approve
board
you.
approves it.
And approved by
Yeah.
the board, right?
Yeah.
That
But if-
sounds good.
Yeah.
Extend an informal conditional recommendation.
I don't know that you need all that.
Could you add one more word?
But I think you're right. I mean, it is.
Tentative, put tentative also.
Tom, did you have anything else?
No, I'm fine.
You sure?
Hey, I have one question to ask on that.
I'm sorry, we've already
Time's
passed
up.
you.
We've used all your time, Don, sorry.
Do we, if we make the initial offer, do we make the initial call to the candidates that don't get the job and say, I'm
I
sorry,
would
we
say
went a different
no.
direction?
I would say no, because what happens if that person, we get here and we go, nope, like we're
Or the
not-
other one doesn't accept it.
We say no, and
Or they don't
then you've
accept.
already told them they're out.
We
I'm
normally,
asking at some point.
yeah, we normally make
Oh,
that,
yeah.
we make that, Adam makes those contacts after,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, you always wait till the board vote to make it after,
Right,
because you
so
don't want to be
then-
like, hey, you're our third choice. You
If
still
I
want to
didn't
come?
get the job,
You're
I
gonna
will
find
be
out.
notified at some point I
Yes.
did not get the job.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
On Facebook Live when they.
On
approve the
Facebook Live
person,
when we.
They got it.
I mean,
Yeah,
we shared and tagged you.
All right, so is there anything else that we need to look at for that? Is
So
there
do you
any
need me to
other
rec,
changes?
there's already been a vote and.
A
you guys-
motion and a
motion
second. So,
With amendments, we just need to adjust it to say with the amendment, accept with the
Yeah.
amendments.
so the motion would be to approve that with the amendments that we discussed. Does that make sense to everybody? All right,
I'll keep my motion the same.
keep your motion. I don't know who seconded it.
I did.
You did, okay.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. I have
All
just
right.
kind of a logistical question or point of order kind of question. So this is a policy, we're approving
So
an
this is a
administrative
procedure.
policy,
This is
not a board
procedure.
This is
policy.
an
This is not a
administrative
policy.
procedure.
It's administrative
Yes.
It's
procedure.
not going into like, so this is going to be like an AP something, or is this just?
Yes, this is an
Yeah,
AP.
This is an
An
AP.
AP, and
Yeah.
that doesn't have to come through the policy committee because it's an AP?
No.
Okay, I'm good. I
And again-
thought that was the case, I was just curious.
If
I've
we
never been
operate
in this
under
situation.
Robert's Rules of Order, the proper procedure would be to vote down this current motion.
Okay.
And then bring it up again to approve with amendments.
Okay.
So I think
vote-
that would
vote
be the
no
Okay,
on
proper way.
so
to-
we're gonna vote
So,
no
Vote no.
on how it was presented.
Can you ever withdraw a motion?
We've had a motion and a second. It's got to be.
gotta be
up or down.
voted
It's got to be acted on.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So, roll
Roll
call,
call on, as written.
as written.
Okay, hold on, let me find my spot. Linneman,
yes.
No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
as written, now with the changes.
As written, no.
Okay,
Yes, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's what we got to vote down first. Vinnie, no. Christie.
No.
Bradley.
No.
Stacy.
No.
Curran.
No.
Silva.
No.
I moved to approve it with the amendments we
With the
made.
amendments.
Seconded.
Okay, so now I got to do.
Any discussion? I'm just-
Please. No, I'm
I
just-
have to ask. So, roll call.
Now we vote? Linneman. You again.
Aye.
Vinnie, aye. Christie.
Aye.
Bradley.
Aye.
Stacy.
Aye.
Curran.
Aye.
Silva.
Aye.
Whew,
All right.
all right.
Good discussion.
It was
There
good
is
discussion.
no other, no executive session. We have no other business, so we will have another meeting June 24th. Anybody has anything for that?
Let us know.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Who was the
All in
second?
favor?
Aye.
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 508.
I vote